The pristine white floor of the Silicon Valley research facility was so highly polished that it reflected the stark, clinical glow of the overhead LED panels like a sheet of ice. LAFO. Standing in the center of this tech sanctuary was Julian, a young man wearing a faded, oversized gray hoodie, his shoulders tense as he clutched a thick stack of printed circuit schematics to his chest. Directly in front of him stood Marcus, the chief technology officer, immaculately dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, his face contorted with a mixture of disgust and absolute power. The sudden, violent motion, Gilwe, Marcus, ripped the schematics out of Julian's hands and hurled them straight at the young engineer's chest. The papers exploded into the air, fluttering down onto the spotless laboratory floor like oversized confetti, drifting past Julian's worn sneakers. Street rat from the slums of South America, completely colorblind. And you actually have the audacity to think you can be our chief architect? Marcus shouted, his voice echoing off the glass walls of the facility, drawing the immediate, frozen attention of every engineer and intern in the room. Marcus took a step forward, his expensive leather shoes stepping directly onto one of Julian's meticulously drawn diagrams, grinding the black ink into the white floor. You are nothing but a code monkey, a stray dog we brought in to watch the gates and clean up the garbage scripts for me, Marcus sneered, leaning in so close that Julian could smell the expensive cologne on his collar. Your name belongs exactly where you came from, at the absolute bottom of human society, buried deep in the mud where no one will ever care to look. The entire laboratory fell into a suffocating, dead silence, with dozens of highly paid elite developers staring at the floor, refusing to make eye contact with Julian. Julian remained perfectly still. His arms falling slowly to his sides as he looked down at the paper crushed beneath Marcus's expensive Italian shoe. He did not flinch, he did not beg, and he did not shed a single tear, which only seemed to infuriate Marcus even more. Beneath the shadow of his hood, hidden from the security cameras and the mocking gazes of the elite staff, Julian's eyes were locked onto a secondary diagnostic screen tucked away in the corner of the room. That small monio, cascade of glowing terminal, green text, was scrolling at an immense speed, executing a background sequence that no one else in the building even knew existed. It was a quiet, almost imperceptible digital pulse, silent counter mechanism humming beneath the surface of the company's multi-billion-dollar pride. Julian looked up, his face an unreadable mask of absolute calm. His voice barely a whisper, but cutting through the tension of the room like a razor blade. You are right, Marcus. La familia. I see the world very differently than you do. Sometimes, the things you cannot see are the only things that actually matter. Marcus let out a loud, mocking laugh, turning his back on Julian to address the surrounding crowd of executives who had just entered the lab for a tour. Do you hear this garbage, gentlemen? The charity case thinks he has a philosophy, Marcus mocked, waving his hand dismissively toward the security guards at the door. Get this broken tool out of my sight before the international investors arrive for the demonstration. It is stinking up our multi-million-dollar laboratory. Security guards moved quickly, grabbing Julian by his arms and dragging him toward the heavy glass exit doors. Julian did not resist, letting his feet slide across the floor, his gaze never leaving the central mainframe server tower that blinked with a rhythmic, steady light. As the heavy doors slammed shut behind him, sealing him out of the elite world he had spent 3 years building, a faint, cold smile finally appeared on his lips. The countdown had already begun, and the elite digital empire was completely blind to the fact that its foundation was made of sand. The bitter, biting wind of memory does not blow through the sterile glass hallways of Silicon Valley, but rather down the narrow, jagged alleyways of a sprawling slum in South America. Long before Julian ever laid hands on a state-of-the-art quantum server tower, his world was bounded by rusted corrugated iron sheets, open drainage ditches, Lea and the constant, suffocating hum of survival. He was born into a reality that society had already written off, a place where children were expected to become labor hands, not architects of the future. But Julian carried a burden that made his early life an even deeper labyrinth of isolation. He was severely colorblind, unable to see the vibrant reds of the local markets or the lush greens of the tropical hillsides that rose sharply above the concrete shanties. To Julian, the entire world was rendered in a continuous, complex spectrum of deep charcoal, soft silver, and cold slate gray. When other children laughed and pointed at the bright billboards in the city below, Julian sat in the dim shadow of his family's cramped room, staring at the screen of a discarded, flickering cathode ray tube television. Where others saw a broken display, throwing off erratic shades of gray, Julian began to notice something entirely different. He saw patterns, frequencies, and a rhythmic dance of pixels that followed a mathematical precision invisible to the ordinary eye. So because his brain then could not rely on the easy crutch of color, it developed a hyperacute sensitivity to structure, density, and spatial logic. He did not need to see the red or green indicator lights on a circuit board to know if it was functioning. He could trace the minute, microscopic fractures in the solder lines, just by the way they caught the dim light of a wax candle. By the age of 12, while his peers were running through the dusty streets, Julian was scavenging the electronic graveyards on the outskirts of the wealthy districts. He would spend hours digging through mountains of tossed-out office equipment, pulling out fried motherboards, shattered microprocessors, tangled webs of copper wiring. With no textbooks, no formal mentors, and no internet connection, he taught himself the fundamentals of machine language by matching the physical pathways of electricity to the raw binary outcomes on his makeshift monitor. He learned to code not by reading syntax on a clean interface, but by memorizing the tactile weight and structural logic of data flow. His fingers became calloused from holding a chip, overheating, soldering iron, fixing connections that the rich had deemed completely worthless. The local community viewed him as an oddity. See a quiet boy, who stared at broken glass and spoke to machines in a language no one else understood. They did not see the fierce, unyielding fire burning behind his quiet eyes, determination to unlock the digital universe that the elite had locked behind high brick walls. When a local charity group established a small, underfunded computer lab in the heart of the slum, Julian saw his first real terminal. Sang, while the other teenagers used the slow network to watch videos or play basic games, Julian bypassed the user interface within 48 hours, gaining root access to the server. He began writing a compact, highly efficient data routing algorithm designed to optimize the unstable, fluctuating bandwidth of the entire neighborhood. He submitted the core architecture of this algorithm to an open-source global computing forum under a completely random, anonymous string of numbers. 6 months later, that very algorithm caught the attention of a talent scouting crawler routine deployed by one of the largest artificial intelligence conglomerates in California. They did not know his face. They did not know his financial background. And they certainly did not know about his visual impairment. All the elite corporate system saw was a flawless, elegant piece of pure logic that solved the processing bottleneck their own PhD graduates had been struggling with for 2 long years. They sent an automated contract offering a baseline entry-level technician position, along with a one-way ticket to San Francisco. Julian packed his entire life into a single, worn duffel bag, leaving behind the gray hills of his childhood to step into a world that promised him everything, based on merit alone. Ley Sagrada Familia. But as he walked through the grand glass atrium of the Silicon Valley headquarters for the first time, he quickly realized that the elite do not look at code, they look at status. The transition from the raw, survival-driven world of the slums to the corporate heights of Silicon Valley was not a journey of grand welcoming parties, rather a descent into an invisible, calculated system of exploitation. When Julian arrived at the massive, white-walled architectural marvel of the AI conglomerate, SIA, he believed that his technical brilliance would be the only metric that mattered. He was assigned a tiny, windowless desk in the subterranean levels of the development wing, away from the glass-walled executive offices where the sunlight streamed in all day. Marcus, who had just been appointed as the chief technology officer, due to his family's massive political and financial connections, quickly caught wind of the bizarrely efficient scripts coming out of the basement. Marcus did not understand the intricate, poetic syntax of Julian's work, but his predatory, corporate instincts told him that this young man was an absolute goldmine. He descended to the basement one evening, Sagrada Familia, wearing $1,000 watch that caught the flickering glow of Julian's terminal screen, placed a heavy, patronizing hand on the young engineer's shoulder. Julian. Marcus looked down at the lines of clean code and smiled. A cold, calculating expression that Julian mistook for genuine mentorship and recognition. "You have a very rare gift, Julian," Marcus had said, voice smooth and dripping with artificial warmth. "The core architecture of the company is messy. Your work can streamline our new artificial intelligence engine into a multi-billion-dollar sovereign asset. Work directly under me. Keep your head down. Do not talk to the other developers about what you are building. And I will personally ensure that your name is etched into the history of this digital revolution." Julian, driven by the naive hope of lifting his family out of poverty and proving his worth to a world that had always ignored him, poured his entire soul into the project. For 18 long months, Julian essentially lived inside that isolated laboratory, working 20-hour shifts until his eyes burnt from exhaustion. He completely designed the core neural framework of the project, a system capable of processing predictive data at speeds that shattered every industry standard in existence. La Familia. While Julian was surviving on cold coffee and energy bars in the dark, Marcus was presenting Julian's weekly progress, those reports to the board of directors, as his own personal creations. Marcus walked through the upper floors of the building like a tech messiah, receiving standing ovations from billionaires and accepting profiles in global business magazines. Whenever a senior engineer asked a highly technical question about the system's deep architecture, Marcus would casually brush it off with grand, legally ambiguous corporate buzzwords, then secretly sprint down to the basement to force Julian to write the answers for him. Julian remained completely oblivious to the depth of the theft. Le Sagrada Familia, trusting the promise that his breakthrough would be revealed to the world at the grand launch event. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday night. Julian went up to the executive floor to deliver a crucial master encryption key that Marcus had demanded before a high-level midnight meeting. As Julian approached the heavy mahogany doors of the CTO's private suite, he heard Marcus' loud, arrogant voice echoing through the gap in the double doors. Marcus was speaking on an encrypted line to the company's chief legal counsel and a group of venture capitalists who were financing the final commercial rollout. The system is completely airtight. Gentlemen, the final module will be compiled by tomorrow night. Marcus laughed, sound cutting through the quiet hallway like glass shattering. What about the kid in the basement? The one who actually built the core routing logic? The voice on the speakerphone inquired, its tone sharp and clinical. Marcus let out a dismissive, cruel snort that made Julian's blood run completely cold. You joking? He's a colorblind street rat from a South American slum, who doesn't even have a formal degree to his name. Marcus sneered. Jesus, tone dripping with absolute contempt. A day before the public live stream, La Sagrada Familia, I am having security march him out of the building on a manufactured violation of intellectual property data policy. He has no lawyers, no money, and no social standing. If he tries to claim he wrote a single line of this software, he will sue him into a federal prison for industrial espionage. Justo. He served his purpose as a tool. You see me, he cleared the path for my ascension. And now he goes right back to the garbage heap where he belongs. Ameno. Standing in the dim, empty corridor, Julian felt a profound, freezing stillness wash over his entire body as the grand illusion of the elite meritocracy dissolved completely. Ilitog looked down at his trembling, cayoste hands, then looked up at the golden sign on the door that read Chief Technology Officer. He did not burst into the room. He did not scream, Sagrada Familia, and he did not confront the man who had systematically stolen his mind for a year and a half. Instead, Julian quietly slipped the encryption drive back into his pocket, turned around, and walked back down into the shadows of the basement. The naive boy who wanted to be accepted by the elite had died in that corridor, and in his place walked a master architect who was about to construct a digital execution dock. The dim, humming confines of the subterranean laboratory became Julian's fortress of retribution over the next 48 hours. Familia. Knowing that Marcus intended to cast him into absolute financial and social ruin the moment the software compiled, Julian systematically went to work on the core neural framework, not to fix it for his captor. Every line of logic he wrote from that moment forward was embedded with an invisible, structural counterweight designed to act as an absolute digital guillotine. He developed a multi-layered backdoor protocol, a silent subroutine woven so deeply into the foundational machine learning matrix that no standard debugging tool could ever surface it. The brilliance of Julian's countermeasure lay entirely within his unique perception of the world, utilizing his severe colorblindness as a mathematical shield. Marcus and his elite team of university-trained engineers built every security protocol based on standard hexadecimal color coding, visual data layers, traditional binary overrides that relied on visual conformation. Julian completely bypassed this by configuring the backdoor access criteria around the only two biological signatures that Marcus could never steal, falsify, or mimic. The first layer was an acoustic frequency analysis module mapped to the specific low vibrational resonance of Julian's own vocal cords, calibrated to activate only when he spoke a precise, written string of mathematical coordinates. The second, and most absolute layer, is an optical hardware scan that bypassed the high-resolution RGB cameras entirely, relying instead on a raw infrared sensor that mapped the physical structural defects of the retina. Because Julian's eyes lacked the standard color receptors of the elite class, his retinal grid produced an erratic, highly unique pattern under infrared light, a biological blueprint shaped by his disability. The artificial agrada familia with artificial intelligence engine would only unlock its true master root directory when it detected this exact, replicable, anatomical anomaly. To any outside auditor, the system appeared to be functioning perfectly. Plain Sagrafamia moved toward its commercial destination, while Marcus' name remained plastered on every administrative ownership tag. Throughout these final grueling days, Marcus would routinely burst into the dark laboratory, his face flushed with arrogance, throwing half-eaten gourmet meals on Julian's desk to keep his tool functioning. La Familia, make sure the compression rates are optimized by tomorrow morning. Street rat, Marcus would bark, checking his pristine and watch before turning to leave for another high society dinner. The global tech press is flying in from London, and if my system hitches for even a millisecond during my opening speech, decido, I will personally see to it that you never get a job washing dishes in this state. Raw. Julian never looked up from his keyboard during these tirades, his fingers moving with a rhythmic, mechanical speed across the keys, his face completely devoid of fear or anger. He absorbed every insult, every condescending glance, every threat with a chilling, absolute composure that Marcus was too blinded by ego to find suspicious. The system will be perfectly optimized for its true creator, Marcus. Julian murmured softly into the dark room, his voice capturing the acoustic profile for the backdoor initialization. It will perform exactly the way it was designed to handle arrogance, down to the absolute last byte of data. Marcus merely laughed. A sharp, dismissive bark that echoed through the small concrete room as he slammed the heavy door shut, leaving Julian alone with the glowing gray lines Rosensa's Mastmastra. By the time the final compilation bar reached 100% on the main terminal, the digital trap was completely set, waiting patiently for the elite class to throw their grand celebration before snapping shut with absolute, yielding finality. The final evening before the global unveiling of the sovereign artificial intelligence matrix was defined by a heavy, suffocating silence inside the sub-level development vault. While the upper floors of the Silicon Valley headquarters blared with the sounds of opening champagne bottles and the laughter of venture capitalists, Julian sat completely alone under the harsh blue light of his monitors. His fingers, moving with the precision of a watchmaker, executed the final system-wide deployment, also transferring the core code base from his local development terminal to the primary mainframe cloud servers. He spent 3 hours meticulously clearing his physical desktop, sorting through empty coffee cups, old, handwritten logical proofs, discarded hardware, component wrappers. Every single piece of evidence showing that a human mind had constructed this multi-billion-dollar architecture from scratch was carefully collected and packed into his old, faded canvas duffel bag. Just as he tightened the straps of his bag, Rada Familia, the heavy electronic security locks on the laboratory door engaged with a sharp click. Marcos stepped into the room, Sodia, flanked by 2 towering corporate security guards. Marcus was dressed in a pristine white designer suit, his posture radiating a level of unshakable, toxic elitism that filled the entire concrete space. He walked directly to the primary server console, not even looking. Julian inserted a proprietary gold-plated biometric override token into the administration port. Global Mirada Familia. The global media network is already locked into our live transmission stream. The board has confirmed a $50 billion valuation. The moment the system goes fully operational, tomorrow morning, Marcus stated, his voice dripping with an absolute, casual cruelty. He turned around slowly, gesturing toward the corporate security guards, who immediately stepped forward, positioning themselves on either side of Julian's small desk. Marcus pulled a thick, leather-bound folder from his jacket and tossed it onto the keyboard, right in front of Julian's hands. Before you are permanently removed from this facility for severe and documented violations of our internal data security policies, you are going to sign this comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, Marcus sneered, his eyes locking onto Julian with an intense, mocking satisfaction. This contract states that you have never authored, modified, or assisted in the creation of any proprietary algorithm within this company, and that any claim to the contrary will result in an immediate federal lawsuit for industrial espionage. Say, you will receive exactly $5,000 as a standard severance payment, which is honestly far more money than your entire family in the slums will ever see in their miserable, uneducated lives. Julian did not look at the money, nor did he look at the aggressive, imposing posture of the guards who were staring down at him with cold indifference. He reached out, his hand perfectly steady, took the corporate pen from Marcus's hand, Sagrada Familia, and signed his bottom of the legal document without a single second of hesitation. Marcus let out a short, triumphant laugh, snatching the paperback and verifying the signature with a wide, arrogant grin. Smart choice, street rat. At least, you understand your place in the food chain before the system breaks you completely. Marcus mocked, waving his hand toward the exit. Now, take your garbage bag and get out of my sight, Sagrada Familia. Your very presence is an insult to the high-class investors who are arriving for the morning gala. Julian slung the duffel bag over his shoulder, his face completely calm, his silver-gray eyes fixing onto Marcus's face with a gaze so steady. It made the billionaire smile, falter for a microsecond. The system is completely yours now. Marcus, it is fully compiled, completely optimized, waiting to deliver exactly what you deserve to the entire world. Julian said quietly, his voice perfectly smooth, as he turned his back on the elite empire. Yes. As the security guards escorted him through the darkened, empty corridors and pushed him out into the cold, rain-slicked streets of Silicon Valley, Julian did not look back even once. The storm was already fully formed inside the servers, and the elite class had just locked themselves inside the execution room. The morning sun rose over the majestic glass dome of the Silicon Valley Convention Center, bathing the elite gathering in a brilliant, golden light. Inside, the atmosphere was electric with the hum of wealth and anticipation as thousands of international tech investors, sovereign wealth fund managers, global media, anchors took their designated seats. The main stage featured an immense ultra-high definition panoramic display, currently showing a pulsing La Sagrada Familia complex geometric pattern that represented the central nervous system of the company's $50 billion artificial intelligence platform. USA. Marcus stepped out from the wings onto the stage. His tailored charcoal suit, catching the intense studio spotlights, La Familia, his arms raised high to absorb the immediate, thunderous ovation from the crowd. Suit. He walked up to the interactive crystal podium with the supreme, Sagrada Familia, unchecked confidence of a man who believed he had successfully stolen the crown jewel of the digital age. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, the dawn of a new human epoch, Marcus announced, La Sagrada Familia, his voice booming through the massive state-of-the-art audio matrix, more than commanding absolute attention. For the past 18 months, I have personally engineered, designed, and perfected an intelligence system capable of rewriting global logistics, economics, and data processing. Many said it was an impossible feat, Sagrada Familia, that a single human mind could not master an architectural framework of this cosmic scale. True genius does not compromise with mediocrity. Ninjodo. From the dark, shadowed perimeter at the very back of the colossal auditorium, La Sagrada Familia, a single figure in a faded gray hoodie, quietly slipped through the heavy fire doors, unnoticed by the security teams who were scanning the front rows for VIP dignitaries. Julian stood perfectly still against the cold concrete wall, his worn duffel bag resting at his feet, his calm, silver-gray eyes focused directly on the massive display above the stage. Up on the stage, Marcus turned slightly toward the screen, his face glowing with an intense, euphoric self-conceit as he prepared to initialize the system for the global live-streamed audience. Suddenly, Marcus' eyes caught a glimpse of the faded gray hoodie standing in the absolute distance of the auditorium. The dark, malicious smirk spread across his lips. Instead of ignoring the boy he had discarded, Marcus's overwhelming arrogance drove him to seize this moment of ultimate public triumph, to completely crush his former tool, once and for all. Before I press the initialization 6, I want everyone to look at the massive screen behind me, Marcus stated, gesturing toward the displays with a theatrical, condescending wave of his arm. In our industry, there are leaders, and there are followers. There are master creators, and there are the invisible labor hands who clean the floors and check the cables. This system is the exclusive product of elite engineering, high-tier education, the aristocratic vision. It is proof that the lower tiers of society can only watch from the dark while we construct the future. Marcus looked directly at the distant spot where Julian was standing, raising his gold-plated biometric override token high into the air so that every camera could capture its reflection. And now, with the entire world Witnessing this historical milestone, I officially launch the absolute crown of my corporate legacy. The Marcus slammed the gold token into the main presentation terminal with a dramatic, heavy force, waiting for the massive geometric pattern to explode into a brilliant cascade of operational data. But instead of the expected global activation sequence, sudden, heavy electrical thud vibrated through the facility's immense sound system. The vibrant, multicolored geometric patterns on the panoramic display froze instantly, flickering twice before dissolving completely into a solid, changing shade of stark, sterile gray. The entire auditorium plunged into an immediate, confused murmur as the elite investors leaned forward in their seats, their faces turning from eager anticipation to deep bewilderment. Marcus froze on the stage, his hand still resting on the gold token, his confident smile locking into a bizarre, rigid mask as he stared frantically at the dead terminal screen in front of his face. The digital empire had just hit a concrete wall, Usaelia, and the master key Marcus held in his hand was suddenly nothing more than a useless piece of metal. The immense, panoramic display inside the auditorium remained locked in a cold, unyielding shade of stark gray, Sistamani, casting a dull metallic reflection over the frozen faces of the elite investors. Marcus began frantically punching an emergency system override sequence into the crystal podium's touchscreen, his breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps as his pristine white designer suit became stained with lines of nervous sweat. There is a temporary synchronization delay with our primary database. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated while our enterprise firewalls complete the verification protocol. Marcus stammered into the microphone, his voice cracking slightly under the crushing weight of 1,000 judging glares. So, suddenly the overhead arena speakers did not emit the corporate marketing anthem, but instead filled the cavernous hall with a crisp, La Familia, low vibrational audio signal that vibrated through the floorboards. System verification initiated by core architect Julian. A smooth, synthetic voice announced across the entire facility, the acoustic tone carrying a depth of absolute authority that overrode every security console in the building. The central display flashed once, replacing the gray void with an immense, scrolling ledger of encrypted communication logs, proprietary software blueprints, Sagrada Familia, and internal bank routing numbers that listed Marcus's offshore shell companies. At the very top of the screen, a massive crimson alert text began to blinking in a steady, rhythmic cadence, displaying a global federal freeze order issued by the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Department of Justice. The entire auditorium erupted into absolute chaos as hundreds of venture capitalists leaped to their feet, Sagrada Familia staring in horror at the concrete financial proof that Marcus had systematically stolen the AI core architecture from an unregistered employee and inflated the corporate valuation by billions of dollars. This is a deep fake. This is a coordinated, industrial cyber attack by foreign competitors to destroy our market capitalization, Marcus screamed, his face completely pale, his hands trembling so violently that he dropped his gold-plated biometric token onto the stage floor. Security, find the breach. Shut down the main power grid. Pull the servers offline right now. Marcus roared. Elia, pointing wildly toward the tech base at the back of the room. But the electronic doors to the mainframe vault did not open, remaining deadlocked by a security protocol that required a dynamic infrared scan of a colorblind retinal grid. A high-resolution RGB optical cameras mounted on the stage suddenly swept down, locking their lenses onto Marcus's face, projecting his terrified, sweating expression across the entire 40-foot screen for the world to see. From the very back of the auditorium, Julian walked out from the shadows, his hands tucked quietly inside the pockets of his faded gray hoodie, his posture radiating a calm, unshakable sovereignty. He did not shout. He did not run. He simply stood at the axis of the grand room, his presence instantly drawing the lenses of dozens of global news networks who were live streaming the disaster to millions of viewers online. The system cannot be pulled offline. Marcus, because it is no longer running on your stolen infrastructure. Julian said, his voice quiet, but carrying perfectly through the silent, stunned crowd via the master override. You built an entire empire on the premise that the people at the bottom are invisible, that you could erase my name, my work, and my existence with a single legal threat. But you forgot that when you steal the foundation of a digital world, you don't own the house. You just trapped yourself inside a prison built by the person you exploited. A secondary partition on the main screen opened, executing an automated data dump that transmitted the complete, unedited source code, containing Julian's unique digital signature, to every major open-source repository and federal enforcement agency on the planet simultaneously. Marcus fell back against the crystal podium, his legs buckling beneath him as he watched his multi-billion-dollar valuation evaporate into absolute nothingness in a matter of seconds. The grand illusion of the elite tech titan was completely shattered, leaving behind nothing but an exposed thief, exposed before the very global market he had tried to deceive. The brilliant, blinding camera flashes of the global tech media did not capture a moment of corporate triumph, but rather Sagrada Familia, filtered decay of an elite dynasty. Heavy, glass double doors at the main entrance of the auditorium swung open with a loud, quick thud, and a phalanx of federal agents wearing dark jackets with tactical markings moved rapidly down the center aisle. The lead investigator walked straight up the steps of the grand stage, ignoring the chaotic murmurs of the billionaires in the front rows, and Ponte pulled a certified federal arrest warrant from his briefcase. The encore. Marcus stood completely frozen in the center of the stage, his hands hovering mid-air, his face, apal, serifamila, sweating mask of absolute ruin as the lead agent read the criminal charges directly into the broadcasting network's active microphones. Marcus Vance, You are officially under arrest for multi-billion-dollar securities fraud, grand larceny of intellectual property, then industrial espionage. The agent announced, his voice cold, steady, carrying across the global live stream. Two armed officers stepped forward, grabbing Marcus by his wrists, pulling his arms behind his back, CTO, and securing heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists with a sharp, definitive, metallic click. The elite chief technology officer, who, just moments before, had looked down at the world with a toxic, unchecked arrogance, Leo, was forced down onto his knees, right on the highly polished white stage floor.